I thought I was saving my family, but now everyone swears I'm the monster. The lies, the pills, the secrets, I don't even recognize myself anymore. Maybe I was wrong all along. Or maybe this was his plan. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. When my 63-year-old husband Tom started hopping between doctors for Xanax and literally nodded off at a red light with our grandkids strapped in the back seat, I knew I had to act. That night while he slept, I switched every single one of his pills with vitamin B12. 2 weeks later, after watching him crawl through hell, I showed him the vitamin bottle and told him the truth. He'd been clean for 14 days. I thought he'd hug me, cry with relief. Instead, his face twisted with rage. He screamed that I'd poisoned him, that I'd assaulted him. By the next morning, he'd gone nuclear. Filed for an emergency protective order. Called every pharmacy in town warning them I was dangerous. Started recording my every word like he was building a case to prove I was some unstable monster. When do you realize you're no longer the hero in your own marriage, but the villain in someone else's story? This is Tom we're talking about. A man who had never touched a pill in his life suddenly spiraling into an addiction that owned him. It began innocently, pain meds after back surgery just for 2 weeks. But those 2 weeks planted a seed. I used to wake up to the smell of coffee he brewed just for me, with tomatoes from his garden on the side. He built birdhouses with purple paint for the grandkids, taught them to tie fishing knots every Sunday. That man? He's gone. Now all that's left is this hollow shell slumped in a recliner, staring at the ceiling fan like it's whispering secrets in the blades. The doctor visits turned into full-on shopping sprees, 3 clinics in a single week. When prescriptions ran out, he found other sources. Our retirement savings began to bleed out, 500 here, 1,000 there. He skipped family dinners, left the grandkids stranded, and every time I asked where he'd been, he lied. The worst part? Watching him slump mid-sentence while our 7-year-old tried to tell him about her day. His words just melted into nonsense. And when I tried to talk about it, he'd snap. I need them for the pain, Martha. You wouldn't get it. You've never had real pain. This isn't addiction, it's medicine. But the breaking point, that was the day he drove the grandkids to school. My daughter called me screaming. Tom had fallen asleep behind the wheel at a red light. Both kids were in the back, terrified. Our granddaughter had to shake him awake while traffic piled up, horns blaring. That night, I stood in the bedroom doorway watching him count pills for the 3rd time, moving them from bottle to bottle like a man trying to solve a puzzle only he could see. His hands trembled as he muttered about how to ration them. And I realized the man in front of me wasn't my husband anymore. He was a stranger wearing Tom's face. So I did the unthinkable. After he passed out, I replaced every pill with B12 tablets. They looked identical. Then I started making calls. Every pharmacy within 50 miles got a photo of him and a warning from me. I called his doctors, his fishing buddies, even his brother who had leftover meds from knee surgery. The hardest call? His dealer, some kid named Brandon. My daughter pretended to be DEA, threatening federal charges if he sold to Tom again. I knew what was coming would be brutal. I researched withdrawal symptoms, stocked the bathroom, canceled every plan. And then the waiting began. Day 1, he said the pills felt weak and doubled the dose. Day 2, sweat pouring off him, hands shaking so bad he couldn't hold his coffee. Day 3, vomiting, muscle cramps, skin crawling. Classic Xanax withdrawal. He prowled the house at 3 a.m., checking every old bottle like he might have missed one. He'd been taking up to 12 pills a day, it was catching up fast. By day 5, he was eating soup. Day 7, he shaved, sat on the porch with me. I thought maybe we made it. Maybe this worked. But then came day 8. He crashed harder than ever. I found him on the bathroom floor, scratching his arms raw, screaming that his bones were on fire. Martha, I'm dying. Just one pill. Just one to taper off. He hallucinated bugs on the walls. Said his dead mother was standing in the corner. I nearly broke. I thought, what if I kill him? What if I'm torturing the man I love for nothing? But by day 14, the storm had passed. He was eating, sleeping, even humming in the shower. I thought it was time to reveal the truth. Tom, I told him, holding up the vitamin bottle, you've been clean for 2 weeks. You did it. You're free. But his face, it went black with anger. You poisoned me. You put me through hell. Then he clutched his back, screaming that the pain was worse than ever. But I knew it wasn't pain. It was the addiction talking. And that's when I realized, my love wasn't enough to save him. He slammed his fist into the counter so hard the sugar bowl jumped. Grabbed his keys, yelling about divorce lawyers, screaming that no judge would let a poisoner near the grandkids. The door slammed, rattling the windows, and I stood there shaking as his truck tore down the driveway, gravel spraying across the yard we planted together 30 years ago. Minutes later, Jessica pulled into the driveway still in her hospital scrubs. Tom had left her a voicemail, ranting that I'd poisoned him. I told her everything. Every detail. The doctor shopping. The fake DEA call. The vitamin switch. She listened, her jaw tight, shaking her head over and over. But at 2 in the morning, Tom came crashing back through the door. His pupils blown wide, reeking of chemicals and cigarettes. He stormed into the bedroom, towering over me, screaming that I'd tried to murder him. I slid my phone under the blanket, hit record, and kept my finger hovering over the 9, ready to dial 911. By sunrise, he was passed out on the couch, an empty pill bottle at his feet. A stranger's name on the label. I took a photo and added it to the folder of evidence I was building. Then came the call from Dr. Hartley's office. Tom had been there ranting about poisoning and malpractice, demanding his medical records. They warned me he was accusing me of assault. My coffee cup slipped right out of my hand and shattered across the floor. When Jessica brought the kids for their regular visit, Tom blocked the door. Told her I was dangerous. Told our granddaughter that Grandma hurt Grandpa. Emma clung to me crying while Jessica pulled out her phone, threatening to call the police. And 15 minutes later, 2 officers walked into our home. Tom changed like a switch had flipped, calm, polite, holding printouts of his prescriptions, quoting Ohio laws about medication tampering. The younger officer kept looking at me like, maybe Tom was right. That night I packed a suitcase while he leaned in the doorway, cold eyes watching me fold the clothes I'd been washing for 40 years. I grabbed my mother's jewelry box, the one she gave me before she died, because something told me I might never step foot in that bedroom again. I stayed with my friend Carol. But 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on her door with papers. Tom had filed an emergency protective order. I was to stay 500 feet away from him and my own home. The next morning, an officer escorted me back. Tom sat in his recliner looking frail, but his voice was calm, measured, convincing. He told the officer how I'd poisoned him. How I'd nearly killed him. How maybe I wasn't evil, maybe I was just slipping into dementia. I saw the officer's face shift. Saw doubt creep in. For the first time I realized. Tom had been planning this from the moment he learned the truth. My desperate attempt to save him? He'd twisted it into a weapon. And when Jessica called me sobbing the next day, saying Tom had shown up at the kids' school trying to pick them up early for ice cream, I knew this wasn't just about addiction anymore. It was about control. About power. And he was winning. The principal called Jessica into his office, sat her down and told her flat out, from now on, both parents must approve any pickup changes. It was like he thought she was playing games with her own children, like our family drama was some custody battle instead of a nightmare we never asked for. That same afternoon I met with a lawyer. I pulled $300 out of a small savings account Tom didn't even know existed. 20 minutes into flipping through my evidence folder, the lawyer leaned back in his chair and looked me dead in the eye. Replacing medication without consent? That can be prosecuted as assault. Intentions don't matter in the eyes of the law. The room went cold. That evening my phone lit up with a blocked call. It was Brandon, the kid who used to sell to Tom. His voice was nervous. He told me Tom had been hounding him non-stop, demanding Brandon testify that I threatened him, that I knew about every deal they ever made. Brandon wasn't taking sides, but he warned me, Tom was recording their conversations, trying to bait him into saying something incriminating. Sunday morning I drove to the church lot, parked and just sat there. I watched families in neat clothes walk through the doors. Through the windows I could see Tom in our usual pew, 3rd row left, his head bowed like he was the one in need of saving. I couldn't make myself go in. Couldn't face the whispers. By Monday things got worse. Carol answered a knock at the door. It was Adult Protective Services. An investigator sat at her kitchen table firing questions at me. Had I ever been violent with Tom? Ever tried to control him? What about my mental health? Carol jumped in, trying to defend me, but the woman only nodded, jotting notes about family members enabling abuse. Then came Dr. Hartley. He called me late Tuesday night, his voice hushed like he didn't want anyone to hear. He dug into Tom's records, 2 years of escalating prescriptions, endless refills, the trail of doctor shopping. He told me he couldn't testify without Tom's consent, but suggested I request pharmacy records through our insurance. He promised, the patterns will speak for themselves. The very next day, Tom knocked on Carol's door holding flowers. He smiled, apologized for dragging family into our problems. He spoke soft, gentle, like the man I once married. He told her about his pain, about how terrified he'd been when I poisoned him, about how he only wanted me to get help. Carol let him in for coffee. Upstairs, I crouched by the railing, listening to him weave his story. His voice cracked at all the right moments. And I could hear Carol's resolve crumbling. She actually said, maybe there had been some misunderstanding. My heart sank. Tom was winning. So Thursday morning I went straight to the insurance office. The clerk printed out 17 pages, 47 prescriptions from 11 different doctors in 6 months. Sometimes 3 pharmacies in a single day. They'd already flagged him for fraud. But when I asked if they'd testify, the man just shook his head. Corporate policy, we don't get involved in domestic cases. 3 days later, Jessica texted me, meet at the park on Maple Street. The protective order kept me away from home. I sat on a bench under the oak trees, watching squirrels chase each other, until Jessica's minivan pulled up. Emma ran straight into my arms. I breathed in her strawberry shampoo and felt her tiny arms squeeze my neck like she was anchoring me to earth. Her brother followed after Jessica's nod. Then Emma looked up at me with wide eyes and asked, why does Grandpa say you're sick in the head? My chest tightened. I just hugged her tighter. Sometimes grown-ups disagree, I told her softly, but love never goes away. Jessica sat down, pulled a small black device from her purse. A voice recorder. She'd found it under my car's dashboard. She hit play, Tom's voice talking about my episodes, about how worried he was for my sanity. We searched the car. 2 more devices, one under the seat, one in the glove box. Jessica called a tech friend with a scanner. He found them everywhere, inside my purse, jacket, even sewn into the lining of my tote bag. Some had been there for months, long before I ever touched his pills. The next morning I laid everything out on my lawyer's desk. He listened, shaking his head as Tom's voice spilled from the tiny recorders, edited, spliced together, twisted into stories where I sounded deranged. One clip made it seem like I threatened to poison him. Another like I planned to hurt myself. My lawyer sighed and said, he's building a case to have you declared incompetent, to take control of every asset you own. 3 days later, the divorce papers arrived by certified mail. The accusations: emotional abuse, attempted poisoning, mental cruelty. He wanted the house, both cars, our retirement accounts, all the savings. Claimed I was too unstable to manage money. Within hours, the bank froze our joint accounts. Neighbors started calling. Mrs. Henderson from across the street told me Tom had opened our home for prayer circles. 15 people gathered in the living room while he cried about my mental breakdown. He passed out tomatoes from his garden, told them he just wanted his wife to get help. People who had sat with me in church for 20 years now avoided me in the grocery store. And then CPS came knocking again. Linda Foster, clipboard in hand, standing at Jessica's door. Someone had reported concerns about the children being around a grandmother with mental issues. We knew who had made the call. Linda poked through the fridge, the bedrooms, took notes. Said the kids would need separate interviews. Jessica's hands shook as she closed the door behind her. Tom had turned the system against us, against his own grandkids. The bank called again. Tom had reported my debit card stolen, ordered a new one to his address. All I had left was $1,800 in a private account. After 40 years of marriage, that was it. That night, I sat at Carol's kitchen table with a notebook, trying to make the numbers work. They didn't. The lawyer wanted $3,000 up front. Apartments needed first and last month's rent. Groceries, gas, it was impossible. Tom sat in our paid-off house while I was a guest in my sister's spare room, watching my life dissolve. Then Jessica called, sobbing. Mark's boss had pulled him aside during his performance review, said Tom had been calling the office, whispering about Jessica's unstable behavior. Asked if it might affect Mark's work. Mark was furious but helpless. It felt like Tom had morphed into some twisted villain straight out of a bargain bin spy thriller. Hidden recorders, smear campaigns, CPS reports. Except this wasn't fiction. This was my life. A tiny flicker of hope came from Robert Smith, one of Tom's fishing buddies. He showed up at Carol's, red-faced and nervous. Said Tom had called months ago begging to buy his leftover pain pills. Robert refused. Now, finally, he wrote it down and signed it, though he refused to testify in court. 3 days later, I ran into Tom at the grocery store. He looked gaunt, hands trembling as he picked apples. I tried to turn my cart, but he spotted me first. Walked straight to an elderly couple by the bananas and said loudly, "She's stalking me. She's dangerous." Soon, half the store was staring. The manager stepped in and Tom clutched his arm, begging for protection. 2 security guards escorted me out like I was the threat. That night, Dr. Hartley called again. His voice was grave. Tom had been to the ER twice, complaining of chest pains. Both times, he told the doctors I'd poisoned him with fake pills. It was all logged in the system now, stamped in official records as possible assault. Hartley said, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's building a paper trail. 2 weeks later, we faced the judge. Tom's lawyer had neat stacks of papers, edited recordings that erased his threats and left only my words. 3 church members testified I seemed unstable. My lawyer presented the pharmacy records, but the judge's gavel kept circling back to one point. I had admitted to switching his pills. The judge called it assault. Extended the protective order for 6 more months. And then she barred me from discussing Tom's medical information with anyone. My lawyer's face went pale. It meant I couldn't even use the evidence that proved his addiction. I was gagged. Tom smiled. Afterward, I sat in my car staring at the steering wheel, hollow, until Jessica climbed in beside me. For the first time, I broke completely. I told her I might lose the house, my reputation, maybe even my grandkids. She held me while I sobbed, but I saw fear in her eyes too. A month later, another call from Brandon. Tom owed him $3,000, was threatening false police reports if he didn't forget the debt. Brandon had the texts. Screenshots of Tom blackmailing him. He showed me in a McDonald's parking lot, shifting in his seat while kids ate Happy Meals inside. But even that proof didn't stop Tom. CPS showed up again. Someone reported I was stalking the kids at school. Jessica pulled up the security footage on her phone. There was Tom 3 times that week, parked outside watching the playground. CPS nodded, said they appreciated the evidence, but had to investigate all reports equally. Meanwhile, Carol went to check the house. She came back crying. Tom was selling everything. My grandmother's china, my jewelry, even the clock his father left him. She sent pictures of empty shelves where 40 years of life used to sit. That night, I drove past the house. Floodlights blazed, cameras mounted on every corner. Through the window, I saw Tom pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. The tomato garden was dead. The purple birdhouses he once built for the grandkids hung weathered and empty. Then Jessica called me, her voice broken. Mark was leaving her. Said Tom's harassment, the CPS visits, the endless stress, it was tearing their family apart. While she cried to me, Tom called her other line. She put him on speaker. His voice was calm, oily. "I'll pay for your divorce lawyer if you just distance yourself from your mother. See things my way." Jessica hung up. Packed 2 suitcases. Brought her kids straight to Carol's. That same night, I was digging through old bank statements when I found them, cash advances going back a year. $500, $1,000 at a time. Matching the exact amounts Brandon had mentioned. The dates lined up with Tom's fishing trips and golf outings, months before his surgery. He'd been buying pills long before any back pain. I called our neighbor, Robert Johnson. He'd once seen Tom stumbling around the yard. At first he didn't want to get involved, but Tom had already threatened to sue him if he testified. Finally, Robert cracked. He admitted he'd written down license plates of dealers' cars, times, dates. 8 months' worth of notes. He handed it all to my lawyer. The next day, Jessica moved permanently into Carol's spare room with the kids. I slept on the couch. We made a system. Jessica handled school drop-offs, Carol did the grocery shopping so Tom couldn't corner me, and I spent my days filling journals with every detail I could remember, every piece of the puzzle my lawyer needed to fight back. 3 days later, I found myself walking into an Al-Anon meeting on the far side of Columbus. The room smelled like old coffee, and everyone sat in a circle of cold metal folding chairs. I felt out of place until a woman named Dorothy sat beside me. After hearing my story, she grabbed my hand tight. Her husband had died of an opioid overdose 2 years earlier, after she tried to save him the same way I tried to save Tom. Her eyes told me she understood. Before I left, she pressed a business card into my hand, a lawyer named William Garrett, someone who specialized in divorces tangled up with addiction. I called that very afternoon. Garrett agreed to review my case for free. Within a week, he had combed through everything. He didn't just see what Tom was doing, he named it. Litigation abuse, he said. A way to weaponize the court system as control. He filed motions challenging the gag order as unconstitutional. To my shock, the judge actually agreed to review it. Then Garrett subpoenaed our bank records. What came back made my stomach drop. Tom had secretly opened 3 new credit cards, both of our names on them, and maxed them all out. $18,000 in just 2 months. Cash advances, payments to dealers, withdrawals. The fraud department froze the accounts immediately and opened an investigation. When Tom realized the bank was onto him, he struck back the only way he knew how. He called Adult Protective Services again, this time accusing Carol and Jessica of exploiting me financially, of isolating me from him. 2 nights later, APS showed up during dinner. The kids were in the other room watching TV while the caseworker separated us one by one. She kept asking if I felt safe, if anyone was controlling my money, if I wanted to reunite with my husband. Carol's hands shook with fury when they finally left. The next morning, while searching through boxes Carol had salvaged from the house, I found one of Tom's old journals. The entry stretched back 2 years before his surgery. My skin crawled as I read page after page accusing me of controlling him, monitoring his every move, trying to keep him weak. Then came an entry from 3 years ago, long before surgery, where he wrote about planning to get pain meds for his back, even though his pain wasn't that bad yet. His addiction hadn't just appeared overnight. He had been plotting this for years. A week later, Garrett got Dr. Hartley into a deposition. For 3 solid hours, that man sat there detailing every red flag, how Tom invented new symptoms, altered prescriptions, claimed bottles were stolen. Hartley testified that my B12 switch wasn't reckless at all, it likely saved Tom's life. He explained Tom had been swallowing enough Xanax every day to kill anyone who wasn't already dangerously tolerant. That hit me like a punch. Tom hadn't stumbled into this addiction. He'd engineered it. 2 weeks later, Emma's school put on a spring play. She was a sunflower, smiling so big under the stage lights. Jessica, Carol, and I sat in the 3rd row. For 20 minutes, I almost forgot the chaos. Then I felt someone slide into the seat behind me. I didn't have to turn around, I knew it was Tom. When I shifted 3 seats over, he followed. Jessica whispered, "We should leave." But before we could, Tom leaned forward and hissed, "You're making a scene." Parents started staring. Security was called. They walked him out while he shouted that he only wanted to see his granddaughter perform. I heard a mother murmur, "He seems like such a devoted grandfather." The shame clung to me long after that night. 3 days later, my phone buzzed nonstop with texts from church friends. Tom had shown up to Sunday service nodding off mid-sermon. Then he jumped up during silent prayer, screaming that he needed his medication. Margaret from the prayer circle called me sobbing. Her grandmother's ring had gone missing after Tom visited. Other women reported cash missing from their purses. The pastor reached out, asking me to come talk. I couldn't do it. The following Sunday, Tom returned alone. He fell asleep in the front pew, snoring so loud the congregation whispered. When the deacon shook him awake, Tom shoved him and stormed out, cursing at everyone. That was the last time he ever set foot in our church. 3 months into this nightmare, the call came at 2 a.m. A police officer's voice on the line. Tom had crashed into the Johnsons' mailbox just 3 blocks from home. His blood test showed Xanax, oxycodone, and alcohol all mixed together. He was sitting in county lockup. 10 minutes later, another call, Tom's slurred voice begging me to bail him out. Promising he'd get help. Threatening me in the next breath. Blaming me for cutting him off. I sat in my kitchen, listening to the voicemail play again and again until Jessica showed up. She sat with me while Carol brewed coffee and the 3 of us decided, no bail. Let him sit there. Let him face it. 2 weeks later, Linda from CPS called with rare good news. She said their investigation found no signs of abuse or neglect by me or Jessica. She even apologized, admitting the reports against us seemed more like harassment than real concern. For once, the truth was on our side. But Tom didn't stay in jail long. He got out through a bail bondsman, using our house as collateral without my knowledge. My lawyer, Garrett, was livid. He filed emergency motions for contempt and exclusive possession of the house. That same week, the credit card companies started calling. 3 new accounts, opened in my name with forged signatures. Thousands of dollars in debt. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. We were entering federal territory. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Brandon, the dealer, got arrested on unrelated charges. And suddenly, he wanted immunity. His lawyer reached out to mine with receipts, texts, recordings. Proof that Tom had been plotting against me. In one recording, Tom said the words I'll never forget, "I'd rather see her dead than sober." Every day, the evidence piled higher. And every day, my family cracked deeper. Jessica's husband, Mark, refused counseling. He said my problems and Tom's chaos were destroying his family. He filed for divorce. Jessica chose me, but the cost was her marriage. 3 weeks later, we were back in court. Tom stumbled in high, interrupting the judge, ranting about conspiracies. When the judge ordered immediate drug testing, Tom refused and stormed out. That was it. The judge granted me exclusive possession of our house. 2 days later, police escorted him back to collect belongings under supervision. I watched from Jessica's kitchen window as Tom shuffled up our walkway, smaller somehow, his clothes hanging loose. He had 15 minutes. 10 minutes later, he emerged with 2 garbage bags and his tackle box. At the mailbox he paused, just stared at the house, before sliding back into the cruiser. That was the last time he saw our home intact. 3 months later, when the protective order lifted, I finally walked inside. What I found looked like a war zone. 3 holes punched into the living room wall. Wedding photos shattered on the floor. Couch cushions slashed open, stuffing spilling out like entrails. The kitchen, cabinets hammered, plates smashed, the dining table flipped and broken. Upstairs, our bedroom gutted, jewelry box crushed. But the worst was the spare room. Every photo album we'd collected, 40 years of memories, piled in the fireplace, burned to ash. Baby pictures. Our parents' portraits. All gone. I knelt, fingers sifting through gray ash until I touched something solid. My grandmother's pearl necklace, blackened but whole. And when I looked out the window, I saw the strangest thing, the yard. The purple birdhouses Tom had built for the grandkids still hung from the trees, untouched. Even in his rage, he couldn't bring himself to destroy them. 2 weeks later, the calls started. Unknown numbers, Tom's voice slurred and venomous. At first he begged. Then he threatened. By the 5th call, he promised to prove I'd tried to kill him. I saved every message for the police. Jessica came over to help me clean. We swept glass, patched holes. In the fireplace ash, she gasped and pulled out my mother's wedding ring, the gold melted, the diamond intact. She slipped it onto my finger and squeezed my hand. Neither of us spoke, but her tears said everything. Then came another call, this time from an insurance investigator. They'd uncovered evidence Tom had filled prescriptions under 3 fake names, even crossing state lines. It was now a federal case. Identity theft. Drug trafficking. The moment Tom's lawyer learned of the investigation, he dropped him. At the next hearing, Tom showed up alone, clutching papers he'd printed from the internet. He ranted for an hour about conspiracies, poison, the medical system. The judge just took notes. Meanwhile, the motel manager had turned over security footage, Tom meeting strangers in the lot, quick handoffs, classic drug deals. With that plus the fraud, his arrest was inevitable. One morning, I wandered out back. The garden Tom once adored was brown, dead, withered. Except for one tomato plant in the corner. Somehow, it still bore 3 bright red tomatoes. I stood there, watering can in hand, wondering why I even bothered. Maybe I was just clinging to the smallest piece of who he used to be. That afternoon, Jessica called me sobbing. Mark had handed her divorce papers in my driveway. He wanted full custody. Claimed Tom's chaos and my part in it had made the family unsafe. Later that week, Dorothy from Al-Anon introduced me to 3 other wives who'd lived through the same nightmare. Each one painted as the villain in their husband's stories. Each one called controlling, heartless, cruel. Even the woman whose husband had been clean 2 years said he still insisted she'd overreacted, that their marriage was ruined for nothing. And then, for months after my first emergency hearing, I got the call. Jessica's voice trembling, they arrested him. The marshals took him this morning. Tom was charged with prescription fraud, identity theft, and interstate drug trafficking. He'd been crossing into Indiana and Michigan, using fake names, stolen IDs, anything to keep his supply alive. His bail? $100,000. Money he no longer had. And just like that, the monster I'd been battling in my own home was finally in federal custody. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.